Yay!
Hello, hello.
Hate it. Still trying to figure out this whole Instagram live thing.
Yeah.
I know. It's
How
always
do you-
like, is it gonna work?
Can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have some people hammering here and a lot of crazy birds around, but that's what it is.
Yeah. The sounds of life, right? That's great.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Iris, for joining us. We released the podcast with you. Gosh, I don't even remember. Like 2 weeks ago, it is now.
Yeah.
And have gotten some really awesome responses. People that are really just sitting with this idea of stripes. Like, what are the stripes in their life, right? Like, what are the things that that people are starting to question and shed, and shifts that people are making. And so we just wanted to hold space for anybody that either listened to that podcast or not, and is just following you or following our work, and wanting to come together in community to just support one another in the deschooling process. So we have some questions that we've gathered, but I would love to just open it up first to anybody who is in the chat that wants to ask a question to Iris. And we're thinking, Iris, like maybe half an hour to give to this conversation, if that works with your timing.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds
Awesome.
great.
Cool. So friends in the chat, friends that are here with us live, what questions do you have for Iris in her untigering, deschooling, deconstructing, tiger parenting world? People are shy.
Yeah.
We can also.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that has like really popped up after the episode was your vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Like your willingness to share so openly. And yeah, so now something did pop up here.
Oh, Dan Moeller. He's
Yes.
like, I just want to say you ladies are awesome.
Oh,
thank you, Dan. Ditto. You and Kai and your family are doing some amazing work too.
Yeah, and so like what I personally really, really loved about that episode was that vulnerability and the fact that like you're not like trying to be the perfect parent, the expert, like you are just you. And it made me wonder really like lately what you feel that you're struggling with most, because I think it's important for everyone to understand that we're all just humans and we all have these struggles. And of course, life is, it's a process. And so sometimes we're in something really deep. And I was super curious to see what you're struggling with lately, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah. How much time do we have? I think the whole thing, I don't know if I said this on the podcast, but it's just like, the freedom to be human is something that I'm really leaning into and pressing into. And so, yeah, just sharing struggles, sharing honestly that, I don't have it all together is a big part of it. And I think more recently with unschooling in particular, as my children get older, I think it's, I've been doing this for a few years and you think that it would get easier, but I think that as my children get older, I feel more anxious, like there's more comparison sometimes because you see what other children their age are doing, and you feel like, oh, they're being prepared for their future career or whatever. And so sometimes I feel anxious and fearful. It's like, are we doing the right thing? Are my children going to be prepared for life? So there's those fears and those comparisons as well. I think, comparison is so hard. And even among unschoolers, where you see, some unschoolers are like really, just going for it and like really diving deep into whatever they are doing, or they're outdoors all the time. I was thinking about doing this Instagram reel where I just take pictures of what my kids do all day, and they're just like on the couch or like on the computer screen all day. Like that's my reality. And like, again, how to dispel the myth that unschooling needs to look a certain way, or yeah, that we have it all figured out. You know, I think we're just feeling through it as we go through.
I think it's so interesting, Paris, about that comparison. It's like, I definitely can relate to that idea. Like, my son is still young, somewhat young, he's going to be 8. Like, okay, I'm going to compartmentalize my fear. I'm going to put it on the side because he's not quite there yet. So I can deal with not comparing, but sure, I'm still like pushing it to the side, right?
You
All the
hadn't
fears.
told me this. I didn't know this.
It's all part of the deschooling,
Yeah.
like the things we learn about ourselves. But yeah, I think then there's always a point where you start to become fearful because you start comparing yourself to others and all of those like indoctrinated, things that we've picked up about how things should look. And so, yeah, I thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Again, it's like another vulnerable moment from you in your journey, because I think we all do it.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, when you do fall into that like comparison mode, what helps you to kind of snap out of it, like to get back on your deschooling path of sorts?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is like coming back to why I'm doing, why I'm unschooling in the first place. Like, why we're doing what we're doing is so that they can, live their authentic selves in ways that feel good for them. And so realizing more like the work that I have to do for myself, like the deschooling that I have to do, where it's like, okay, you're at this certain age, you should be able to do these things, or feeling like in order to prepare for your future, you need like these skills, or you need this information, which is all very schoolish in a lot of ways, right? So again, like acknowledging the fear, acknowledging, okay, I feel this certain way, but then digging deeper into it, like, are my fears like grounded in truth, or is it just based on these schoolish ideas? So there's that. And then I think also just being in community with other people who have gone before me, and who there's grown unschoolers, there's parents of like older unschoolers, and so that's so helpful to see it, how it's worked out for them. And again, that because each of us are so, our families are so unique and different, that doesn't guarantee anything for me. And so again, releasing the need for a guarantee, that releasing the belief, the false belief that I have control over a lot of these things, that I can do something to make something happen. And I can't. There are no guarantees, even if you go to school, right? And so releasing some of those anxieties and like worries about the future, and learning how to be present in the now and just paying attention to what's happening now.
Yeah.
So
Beautiful advice. Thank you. So we do have a few questions that came in. One of them, the first one is, how do you handle chores and allowance? Yeah.
yeah, so I try not to call it chores, just because that sounds like, nobody likes to do chores. So we just sort of describe it as family responsibilities. We really try to foster this idea of like a team mentality in our family. So we're part of a team. We live in this house that we share together. We have spaces that we are in together. So how can we, work together so that this is like a warm, welcoming space for all of us? And so we don't, I think I wrote a blog post about this a few years ago, and it's adjusted over the years, but we don't really have any strict chore requirements or anything like that. There's just been, we've just fell into certain things. Like we've asked for help in certain areas, and like nowadays, my children load the dishwasher, dry the dishes, like empty the garbage. They do their own laundry. There's a lot of things that they do on their own, but there's no punishment if they don't do it. There's no anger. There's no like chart. And if at times they're busy doing something, like one of us will pick it up, or so it's very dynamic. And again, like we want to see it as a team. Like if somebody is busy and can't do that job, like somebody else hopefully will step in. So that's what we've done. There was a time when we like wrote up all the responsibilities that had to be done in the household, and we just wrote it on a list, and then you know, posted it on our refrigerator and just asked like, you know, these are the things that need to be done around the house that we can all share. So keep your eye out. Like if something is on this list and you see that it needs to be done, then, you know, maybe do it, maybe try it out. Instead of feeling like, because if it's like, we have our you know, 4 jobs that we do, and that's our responsibility and nothing else is our responsibility, then we don't necessarily foster that like love and thoughtfulness and care and service to one another. It's all about like, well, I did my job and you're responsible for your job. So yeah, and it's always like they've just fallen into that rhythm of certain jobs that they always do, and they're happy with that. So that has worked for our family. But yeah.
Me, Iris, but I was saying it sounds like partnership, like
Yeah,
in partner and community. Like we spoke about this on the podcast, which somebody asked, where can they find the episode? Radical Learning Talks is the name of the podcast. You can find it on Anchor or Apple. We have some links to it in our bio as well. And but yeah, that idea of community, like we're all in this together. We're not individuals. Like it's moving from that individualism to that collective thinking.
yeah. And as for allowance, like we don't really do allowance, or we don't tie money to chores. I think again because that feels like work, and that feels like wage, and that feels like a transaction, where we want to, again, in a family relationship, that's not necessarily the type of economy that we want to be fostering. We want like a gift economy. We want community. We want love. And so yeah, like if we give them money at all, it's just for them to learn how to manage money, and that's like totally separate from their behavior, from their grades, from their chores and the responsibilities. You know, that's just something that they have separate from any of that. And in fact, we don't actually give any allowance. Like what happens is my children, if they need something, they'll talk to us about it, and we'll like, you know, get it for them if needed. And then they, in our Chinese culture, a lot of the times they get red envelopes. They get these hongbao for their birthdays, for Christmas, for, you know, different things. And so they can save up that money and do with it as they wish. And so we don't micromanage their money for them. We, you know, obviously talk with them about good ways to save and how to use their money wisely, but they are free to, like, for example, if they want to spend $60 on Elden Ring or whatever, it's like, okay, let's talk about it and see if it's like, if that makes sense, then go ahead, you know, we support you in that. So that's how we do money in our house.
How interesting, because there's this other question that pops up, which says like, is there things we can do or language we can use around our kids about money, things to give, teach them, and abundance versus scarcity? And this is an immigrant mom who's asking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for my husband and I, as children of immigrants, that's something that we are still like deconstructing and still working out. You know, we're both very frugal. We don't like to spend money. And so there are things that like we have to do some healing on our own, and just to be in conversation with our children again, like instead of coming down hard with rules like, no, that's a waste of money, we're not going to do that, we can say like, I feel really uncomfortable with spending this money because like I didn't grow up with the freedom to do that. And like so like again, process that with our children and explain why we feel the way we do, not and then again be in conversation with them, and sometimes like to realize that our issues it's unfair to, you know, project those onto our children because the situation is different. You know, we're not in that that environment where money is super tight, hopefully. Well, you know, for some of us that is a reality. And so we have to be wise about how yeah, just what we do with the resources that we have. In terms of language, I mean, I think there's this idea of generosity that we try to foster. And so generosity is like letting love and resources like flow between people, right? And so when we hold things too tightly to like try to protect ourselves and try to just provide for ourselves, and sometimes that's like a trauma response, and that makes sense because we hadn't grown up with a lot. And so again, just to be really compassionate and patient with ourselves when we feel those ways, because there's a reason for it. And how to like, yeah, again, be very gentle with ourselves. But I would say like a lot of modeling, a lot of yeah, just talking about it and wanting to foster the spirit of generosity. And sometimes that, like, especially for immigrants or children of immigrants, that means generosity towards ourselves. You know, that means like, just recently I went shopping and I never buy things full price. I like always go to the sale rack and find like the cheapest thing, even though I like don't really like it, but it's like, okay, it's a good, you know, price. And so I'll get it. And then recently I just bought things that I liked that were full price. And it felt like such a splurge, you know, something that I would never do. And yet I knew that I would like wear these items more often. I would enjoy it more. They would probably last longer, all of those things. And so like fostering the spirit of generosity in general towards ourselves and towards others, I think.
Also, what I'm hearing from you, Iris, is like that what you are doing is you are doing a really great job of introspection, like understanding what's going on in yourself. And it's through that understanding that you can actually talk to your kids, because then you can be transparent and honest and authentic and just share. And I think that I really want to highlight it because I see that many times in our deschooling process, that is where we stumble. Because we're disconnected from what's really going on inside of us. And what you're sharing shows the opposite. It's like connecting with yourself, understanding where you're coming from, and sharing openly with your kids.
And sharing your values, like what's important for you, right? What's important that you cultivate in your family unit, in your community. I think is because maybe your kids won't have that same value, but it's like you're sharing of yourself, and like you're saying through that modeling, then it's something that they can understand, and they can choose.
Yeah, exactly. That idea of choice, right? Like if it's something where we are coercing a value, you know, like sharing or giving, like you have to give, you know, share your toy, or you have to save the certain amount to give to the church or whatever, like where it's required of you instead of an invitation. So I think that's another word that I like to use. It's like an invitation. They can say yes, they can say no, but when we present something as an invitation, it's like enticing. It's like, oh, I get to decide. I have some autonomy and some agency in this area, and I can choose what feels good to me. And usually they want to choose what's good because it feels good. It's good for them. It's good for their relationships. And we don't have to make it happen. We don't have to like require it of them when we, you know, present it as an invitation.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so some more questions rolled in. And this also kind of ties into your self-care of going and buying that full price item. Hooray. What does self-care look like? How often, what for you? I find that when I'm feeling depleted and exhausted, I just cannot be the kind of parent I want to be and end up getting triggered even more. Very smart.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah. I
you.
mean, I feel like there's so many layers to this. And I would say for me, it's less about doing something and more about what's happening internally. So again, like that introspection. So um, instead of feeling like, oh, I want to, um, go get a massage, or I want to take a day out and be by myself. I mean, I do think that there's value in that, like um, choosing to go out and do things that feed our souls. But I think ultimately it's like about us, I don't know, like knowing ourselves and allowing ourselves to just be, and to seek out the things that really feed and nourish us. So like for example, for me has been like, I feel really, shitty today, and that's okay. Like just letting it be okay for us to feel whatever we're feeling. Like, oh, I feel worn out and irritable and super triggered, and that's okay. Like to hold space for everything that I'm feeling, for every way that I am showing up in that moment, to be really like compassionate and accepting of who I am. And then when I like hold more space for that, then the goal is not necessarily for me not to feel that way. Sometimes self-care is like, oh, how can I not be upset? How can I not, but sometimes for me what it is for us to make space for it to be okay to feel that way, if that makes sense. Um, to yeah, just be more expansive in how we show up for ourselves, so that self-care doesn't become sort of like this escapism, but it's just more openness and acceptance of what is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's here in Mexico, like to translate holding space. Like, what does that mean, holding space? And I was like, oh, that's a good one, And in English, it is very much like the image, like you're holding a container for something to happen. But I'm curious, what does that mean for you when you say holding space? How do you do that for yourself and for those around you?
Yeah, I think when I say that, I mean like just approaching it with a lot of non-judgment, right? Like instead of saying this is good, this is bad, I need to get rid of this, I need to keep this. It's like what we do when our children have big emotions or something. Instead of trying to control it, instead of labeling it and like feeling really triggered by it, what we can do is like make space for it. It's like, it is what it is, and it's fine. There's room for that here. There's room for that here. And so how can we make room for ourselves to just be fully human again, fully ourselves, without judgment, without feeling like I shouldn't be like this. And I think it's from that place that we can then really tap into finding the things that can, feed our souls, and not just do quick fixes or, disassociate. But then again, like I'm saying, like I feel like it's fine to disassociate sometimes. It's fine to veg out, or to, because there's just all these different ways that we have to deal with the stresses and the challenges around us. And so it's, again, instead of making ourselves feel bad for doing those things, let's just like, again, a lot of grace, a lot of compassion, a lot of holding space. So again, like if you spent all day binging a Netflix show, I mean, I'm totally okay with that. I do that too. And so like, why do we have to say like, oh, that wasn't true self-care? I should have, gone and journaled or gone on a hike. It's just like, there's so many ways that we can care for ourselves. So again, instead of like having, again, that schoolish mindset where there are what right ways, there are wrong ways, there's like only one answer, only one right answer. It's just like, we can feel what feels right for us in the moment. And if it wasn't really good, we can learn from that and we can make different choices tomorrow. It doesn't have to be a big deal.
Have tomorrow, thank goodness, like, and that's, I mean, we don't always have tomorrow, but, like while we're here, let's use them as opportunities to grow and learn. Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Iris. And also, like, I think inquiry and asking questions, and for me, what's been super helpful in my deschooling journey is just like not settling for the judging thought that just comes in, like really asking, like, why do I think that way? Like, why is it not okay for me to be sitting here watching TV right now? Like, where did that thought come from? Whose idea was that? And like reclaiming my own thinking around whatever it is that the judgment that's popping up.
Yeah.
Cool. So another question, how would you inspire your very, very, very unwilling child to learn and participate in schoolwork? Big question.
Can you read that again? How do you inspire
your very, very, very unwilling child to learn and participate in schoolwork?
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm an unschooler, and so just the idea of like coercive learning it just doesn't inspire learning, right? When learning is forced, it's not inspired. And so if they are really unwilling, there's a reason. There's a reason they're unwilling. Maybe it's not a topic that they're interested in. Maybe they just don't like feeling coerced. They don't like feeling like they don't have any autonomy. And because I do want to say that I believe that children are inspired. They are so engaged in learning the things that they want to learn, which oftentimes doesn't fall under schoolwork. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And so again, like with deschooling, unschooling is questioning why we think that forcing learning in these schoolish subjects is valuable, or even like, even as we think about, at least for me, when I think about what I learned in school, I don't remember 90% of it, right? Is most of it really valuable, or just have we been fed this belief that you have to learn those things? When in reality, like, there's so many other like beautiful things that we can learn in life that are based on our true values or on the life that we want to live. And so I think the main thing is to inspire the love of learning, inspire just the following your passions, following the things that you that your child loves, instead of trying to inspire them to learn in these particular ways, to fit those standards, or because I think that still comes in with an adult agenda, where we're coming in and saying, these are still the things that I want you to learn. So how can I make it fun? And how can I make it, incentivize you in some ways to do these things that I want you to do? And children can see right through that. Like they feel manipulated, they feel controlled and coerced. And so what unschooling does is really to follow their lead, to see what it is, like, how are you inspired right now? Like, how can I help and support your inspiration, instead of trying to inspire them to do what we want them to do?
Yes.
I hope that makes sense.
Yes, Cyrus. And that idea too, going back to why are they not willing, right? That there's like a whole world under that iceberg. Like, there could be so many needs that the kid has that aren't being met, and who knows, maybe they're bullied in school,
or they don't feel safe. And I was thinking also about like the learning piece, like inspire them to learn. Like if we observe kids, they learn all the time. But as you say, the things that they're interested in. And so I think that not necessarily will they want to learn what adults want to teach them. And I think that we need to look at that and ask ourselves why do we believe that that is the only learning that is happening? Because there's so much other learning happen the rest of the time.
Mm-hmm. Iris, I have one more question if you have a few minutes, which
Sure.
is I'm just super curious about this, like deschooling. There's so many things to deschool, right? Like, oh my gosh, the list goes on. Our beliefs around food and religion and education is just one of them. I'm curious right now in your personal deschooling process, like what are you actively like deschooling? Like what is something that you're like, for example, like the idea of perfectionism is something that we've been talking a lot about like in our work and trying to unpack that. Is there something that is really present for you in your deschooling that you're like really trying to sort through and unpack right now?
Oh, there's like so many things. I mean, something that I've just been thinking about more recently, it feels very abstract, is just this idea of like precise language and how I don't really believe in that anymore. What I mean by that is just like in certain spaces, there's like really an emphasis on like using the right words, saying things in a way that you mean, having the right vocabulary, and all of that stuff. Like sometimes on social media platforms, people get very nitpicky about that. Or like I do a post and like people are very nitpicky about the words instead of the idea. And I think that's just very, I feel like that's a very colonized way of thinking about language and a very binary way, whereas I feel like language is very relational. Language is like about understanding the message, and especially in collectivist cultures like Asian cultures, there's so much unspoken language. There's like there's as much, you get as much information from what is not said as what is said, and to require everything to be spoken, like whether that's boundaries, whether that's like language or just anything, and requiring that to be explicitly spoken, I think is very schoolish. And how can we learn to, I don't know, just play with it a little bit more, understand people's hearts, like just as we want to look at what's going on underneath the behavior with our children or with ourselves, like how can we look underneath the words that are spoken and underneath the language to what's really going on in somebody's heart, or what the message is really trying to be communicated in something that was written or spoken. I think that requires a lot more empathy and a lot more openness and understanding and trust with one another. And in this age of social media, that's harder, but I think, I don't know, that was sort of abstract, but that's something that I'm sort of thinking about, how can we just, again, dig a little deeper underneath language, underneath the words that we use, instead of requiring everybody to like say exactly what they mean in order for me to understand it.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, deep.
So important. Thank you so much, Iris. For those of you that haven't had a chance to listen to the podcast, it's on our you can find a link on our bio. Iris really shares so vulnerably about her unschooling journey, about how unschooling and deschooling is social justice and liberation work, anti-oppression work, the ties there. Thank you. Iris, do you have anything you want to say or add before we?
Yeah, I'm just so grateful for having a chance to share, and yeah, I hope that other people can, again, just like see that it's not just about education, you know, like unschooling really is not just about how can we get our children to learn the things that we want them to learn, right? But it really is about honoring who they are and learning how to live as free people. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yay. That gives me so much hope for the future. Really, that we can just turn to just being and seeing each other as humans.
yeah.
All of us. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely
Hope to
having
have
you
you on again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Iris.
Bye. Yes, thank you.